Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into something really cool, neuromarketing, where marketing gets inside your head, literally. We're going to break down how it works, why it matters, and maybe uncover a few surprises along the way.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. Imagine knowing exactly how people's brains react to that new ad campaign or why that jingle gets stuck in your head for days. That's the power of neuromarketing.
Like being marketing detectives, but instead of fingerprints, we're talking brain waves and heart rates. We've got a whole stack of research on this, so let's get right into it.
Sounds good to me.
All right, first, we got to talk about fMRI, all right?
Yeah, go
This
ahead.
one always blows my mind. Giant magnets, tracking blood flow, seeing what parts of the brain light up when someone sees an ad.
It's like watching someone's brain make decisions in real time. You see which areas are activated when they see a product, a logo, even a color. Gives you incredible insights.
Whoa. See, that's what I'm talking about. That's insane. But fMRI isn't the only tool in the docs, is it? There's EEG too, right? Tell us about that one.
So with EEG, we're talking about electrodes on the scalp, picking up those electrical signals from the brain. It's awesome for measuring how engaged someone is.
Like if they're really paying attention to that commercial, or if their mind is wandering off to think about, like, what to have for dinner or something.
Exactly. EEG can tell you if an ad is grabbing someone's attention or just putting them to sleep. Marketers eat this stuff up.
Makes sense. No more pretending to care about car insurance ads, huh? The truth is out there, thanks to EEG. But it gets even wilder, folks. Enter biometrics.
Oh, yeah, biometrics. This is where things get really interesting.
Now, for anyone who doesn't know, biometrics is all about tracking those subtle physical reactions we have to, well, anything.
Heart rate, sweating, even those tiny facial expressions we make without realizing it. Our bodies betray us even when our minds are trying to play it cool.
So even if you think you're being totally neutral, your body's spilling the tea.
You got it. And that data, pure gold for marketers. Take Coca-Cola, for example. They've used biometrics to test how people react to their ads.
What'd they find out? Don't leave us hanging.
Those feel-good, nostalgic ads, those trigger a real, measurable physiological response. Turns out, nostalgia sells, especially when it comes to sugary drinks, apparently.
Fascinating. Okay, one last thing we got to cover, the implicit association test, or IAT. Now, this one dives into some deep psychological waters.
It sure does. The IAT is all about uncovering those hidden biases we might not even know we have. It's not about what people say they like, but what their subconscious really feels.
So it's like a lie detector test for your brain. But instead of catching you in a fib, it's revealing your true feelings about a brand, even if you'd never admit it out loud.
Spot on. It's a powerful tool, and it's helped researchers and marketers alike understand how our implicit biases influence our choices.
Okay, so we've got all these tools that can basically read our minds and tell us how we feel about brands and products. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It is pretty futuristic when you think about it. But the question is, how are these tools being used in the real world? How are companies actually applying neuromarketing to get us to buy their stuff?
Well, to answer that, let's jump into some case studies. And trust me, some of these are wild. Let's start with a classic example, Campbell's soup.
Ah, Campbell's. They really dove headfirst into neuromarketing.
They did. They completely revamped their label design based on what they learned from studying people's brains. Remember that whole thing?
How could I forget? They were trying to figure out why their classic red and white labels weren't resonating with younger generations, so they turned to fMRI.
Did they, like, stick people in brain scanners while they shopped for soup?
Not quite, but they did use fMRI to study brain responses to different label designs, and what they found was super interesting.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more.
They discovered that these new, bolder designs they were testing were lighting up the reward centers in people's brains, the areas associated with pleasure, visual attention, all that good stuff.
So they were literally seeing which designs made people's brains light up with excitement. Like, ooh, that soup can looks delicious.
Pretty much. And guess what? The old labels, not so much brain activity. They were practically putting people to sleep.
So what did Campbell's do? Did they ditch the old design and embrace the brain-approved labels?
They did, and the results were impressive. The new labels, the ones that got those brains buzzing, led to a significant increase in sales, especially among that younger demographic they were after.
It's like they cracked the code.
Yeah.
Figured out what our brains crave, even if we didn't know it ourselves.
Exactly. And Campbell's is just one example. Tons of brands are using these techniques to get inside our heads.
Like Frito-Lay, right? Those chips bags are iconic.
They're practically a case study in Neuromarketing 101. Frito-Lay used EEG and eye tracking to see how our brains respond to everything. Colors, shapes, even where they put their logo on the bag.
So it's not just about making a tasty chip. It's about understanding how our brains perceive the whole package, the colors, the fonts, the whole shebang.
Exactly. They found that our brains, especially in a crowded grocery aisle, are hardwired to be drawn to bright colors and clear messaging. It's like our brains are on autopilot, scanning for something that pops.
Like a moth to a flame, but for chips.
Hmm.
It's brilliant, really. They're not just designing packaging, they're designing for our brains.
It's all about understanding how our brains make decisions, especially when we're bombarded with choices, and clearly it's working.
It's like they're speaking directly to our primal lizard brains. But okay, we've talked about how brands use this stuff to grab our attention, make us feel things, even tap into our deepest desires. Which leads us to the big question. Is any of this ethical?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, is it okay for companies to be using our brainwaves and, like, sweat responses to sell us stuff? Where's the line?
Right, it feels kind of icky when you think about it. Like, are we being manipulated?
Well, that's the thing. Like, any tool, it depends on how it's used, right? Neuromarketing can be incredibly powerful, but with that power comes responsibility.
So it's not as simple as saying it's all good or all bad. There's a gray area.
Exactly. And that's where the conversation gets really interesting. We need transparency. Consumers should know how these techniques work and how their data is being used.
Right, so we can make informed choices. Like, do I want to buy those chips just because the bag is shiny or because I actually want those chips?
Right. Knowledge is power, as they say. The more we understand how our brains work and how marketers are trying to, influence how they work, the better equipped we are to navigate that landscape.
Totally. It's like learning the cheat codes to the marketing matrix, but instead of racking up points, we're racking up, like, self-awareness.
I like that analogy. It's about empowerment.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Brain scans, biometrics, the ethics of it all.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But I want to bring it back to our listeners for a sec. For all the marketing nerds out there, what are the key takeaways? What can they learn from all this brain stuff?
Good question. I think the biggest takeaway is that neuromarketing isn't about replacing traditional marketing, but complementing it.
So it's not about throwing out the old playbook, but adding some new high-tech tools to the mix.
Exactly. It's about gaining a deeper understanding of why consumers do what they do, like what's happening in their brains that makes them click on that ad or buy that product.
Right. And when it's used ethically, thoughtfully, it can help create marketing that feels more authentic, more connected to what people actually want.
Absolutely. It's about working with our brains, not against them.
I love that. It's like marketing with empathy, which is kind of what it should be all about. Instead of trying to outsmart people, we're trying to understand them better,
Yeah.
which I think is a good thing. But, it makes you wonder, as consumers become more aware of all this neuromarketing stuff,
Yeah.
are brands going to have to, like, up their game?
It's a fascinating dance, isn't it? As consumers become more savvy, marketing has to evolve. It's a constant back and forth.
Like a game of cat and mouse, but with our brains. I kind of love it. And you know what? It makes me optimistic. Because if brands are always trying to understand us better, our needs, our desires, even the subconscious stuff, then maybe, just maybe, marketing will become less about manipulation and more about, well, genuine connection.
I like the way you think. It's an exciting time to be in this field, that's for sure. Who knows what amazing discoveries are still to come in the world of neuromarketing?
Right. It's like the Wild West out there. Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've journeyed into the depths of the human brain and explored how brands are using that knowledge to sell us stuff. It's been a wild ride.
It has. It's been great chatting with you.
Likewise. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into neuromarketing. Hopefully you've learned a thing or two, maybe even had a few aha moments along the way. And hey, next time you see an ad, think about what's going on behind the scenes. You might be surprised what you discover.
Absolutely. Keep those brains buzzing, everyone.